Hello everyone, welcome to my session. I'm Sarhan Imène, an architect and a PhD student at the University of Blida in Algeria. Today we are going to present to you a presentation entitled The Revalorization of the Vernacular Villages Heritage of the Ores region through an Eco-touristic Approach. To start, we are going to briefly talk about the heritage definition. Since the last decades, heritage became a topical issue, no longer considered as the material aspect of the building. It is defined today as a set of tangible and intangible goods. It is also the interaction of a population in its environment, which is called the living heritage. The living heritage leads to a cultural heritage, which is relative to all the intangible heritage, such as rituals, oral traditions, customs, music, festivals. Also, in the tangible heritage, we find the constructive know-how, like it is the case in the vernacular villages shown on the picture, where we can find several very ingenious techniques allowing to have an architecture adapted to the environment in which it is built. Our case of study is situated in Algeria, which is a country in North Africa, on the Mediterranean coast, with more than 1,600 kilometers of coast. Our region of study is a mountainous region called the Ores. The highest peak in the region is the Mount Chilia, with an altitude of 23-28 meters, crossed by two parallel fertile valleys of the two principal wadis that are called Wad Abdi and Wad Labyad. As we can see on the picture, this is a card of the region, of the Ores region, with the two principal wadis. In red, we have Wad Labyad, and in red we have the Wad Labyad Valley, which is in the southern part of the region, and in yellow we have the Wad Abdi's Valley in the northern part of the region. So these two valleys were populated centuries ago by the Shawiya population, which are Berber tribes, one of the oldest population in the Maghreb. So for our study, we have chosen four principal villages, which are the village of Bouzina, Men'a, and Amentan in the Wad Abdi valleys, and the village of Roufi, right here in the valley of Wad Labyad. These villages were chosen for more or less the good conservation of their traditional houses, as well as for the natural landscape and the immediate environment they offer, and the different possibilities to create a sustainable tourism project. Now we will pass to a historical background. Based on our documentary research, the Berber population is the first to be established in the region. Historically, the period of existence of a human presence in the Ores has no exact date, although different researches and hypotheses have been established. The oldest documentary source that was found on the Ores is a Latin inscription dating from the middle of the 2nd century AD, engraved on a rock face, discovered in 1850. In his book Riches of Algeria, the engineer Henri Fournel discovered Ores and described it as a famous mountain for centuries by the spirit of independence of its inhabitants and the respect of the population for their hierarchical leaders, as well as their struggle against the various conquerors of the Maghreb, such as Vandals, Roman, Arabs, and French. The images below represent old pictures of the ancient villages. On the pictures, we can see the vernacular houses in the village of Amentan, such as in the first picture. The second picture represents Roman inscriptions, which is still present in the region of Imène. We can still see this inscription. The two last pictures represent a part of the intangible heritage of the region, which is celebrations. The population still have the same celebrations, the same music, and the same dance. The first picture represents an old picture of the old village of Thagust. In 1946, the village is in the region of Buzina, where we can observe houses constructed with dry stone in perfect integration with its natural landscape. While on the other picture, we can observe different architectural styles and the use of completely different building materials, such as bricks, cement, concrete, creating a contrast between the landscape and the buildings. The first picture is an old picture of an old village. The second picture is a recent constructions constructed beside the old ones, the old villages. The abandonment of traditional houses by its villagers is due to two principal phenomena. The first one is the need for comfort and modernism. But this need has been reinforced by a state program offering rural constructions aids, and this pushed the population to leave their traditional houses and traditional constructions to create and to construct just beside in a different modern style and in different modern architectural buildings materials. The pictures represent the deterioration of the villages. This is a current state of those traditional villages. As we can see, these constructions have been constructed with dry stone, adobe, and timbers. On the third picture, we can see even troglodyte houses. So the showy houses are varied in form, constructions, and materials, and that from a village to another. This depends on the geographical location and the local materials, of course. In the region, stone is the first used material, particularly for walls. Stone is prominent because of its abundance. Used in form of unworked rubble, dry or with mortar. We can also find earth that is used especially in the southern part of the region. Being cheap, it is used for building fences, walls, floors, roofs, and even for as a plastering material. For finishing, we find timber that is considered as an important building material in traditional constructions, especially for floors, roofs, also used for doors, windows, shutter, door and windows frames, and lintels. In the Orange region, we find different types of timber used for construction, such as cedar, oak, juniper, apricot, and stone is the most durable of buildings materials. The vernacular style shows a direct participation of the inhabitants in the creation of their homes, which reflects the expression of their personal and social needs. Here we have the cultural heritage and the way of life. So A perfect social organization is installed between the harsh climate and the hostile environment of the region. The population had no choice but adapting their needs to the environment by creating a whole system and a collective organization allowing their prosperity. From architecture, agriculture to different management systems of the territory, the population has created a living heritage. The population has created a living heritage and know-how in different domains, a special social organization between collective and individual use of space. As we can notice on the picture below, different numbers, and each number represents a building or a function. We will notice the construction of a collective attic at the top, followed by the installation of the village below, often built in inaccessible areas and quite difficult to access. For favoring more or less the flat spaces for agriculture and the irrigation of agricultural terraces, followed by number 4, which represents palm trees installed on the bed of the wet, and finally number 5, which is the wet. Changing houses but not habits. We have noticed during our work in situ that the social practices and lifestyle of the inhabitants remained unchanged despite the change in housing, as well as the new construction plans do not correspond to the inhabitants. The pictures show that despite the presence of many modern comfort needs, the population is still using archaic methods. We've noticed during our work in situ, that the population and the inhabitants are still using the same methods and the same methods than years before, moving on donkey back, cooking at the same manner with the same tools. That mean that the population is still very attached to their heritage and their way of life. We did interviews with the population who abandoned their traditional constructions and who lives in new habitat, not very far from the old one, to know if the inhabitants are ready to abandon their proprietary rights of their priorities. So we meant by that the traditional buildings. We have been surprised that more than 70% are not ready and that they will not disclaim and abandon their rights against 20% who are ready to abandon, and we have 10% with no opinion. Most of them were young. So nowadays the potential of indigenous planning and building methods is being neglected. Traditional architectural forms are being progressively destroyed due to contact with the modern world. They are being replaced by Western methods and architecture, often irrelevant to local traditions and needs. The indigenous architecture of the Ores constitute a unique heritage. Definite steps should be taken to preserve it, at least in part. With all the tangible and intangible heritage of the region, its preservation becomes a necessity. The aim of our work is to change the image of the region and to create new references in the minds of tourists to approach this region with curiosity and new look. The success of this program depends greatly on the preservation and the promotion of cultural heritage. We have considered proposals and actions to be enforced for the promotion of cultural heritage and the protection and valorization of vernacular architecture and landscape heritage. The first one would be create a road tourist circuit and add pedestrian circuits allowing walks around the sites. The intervention includes the creation or the rehabilitation of access road to the sites by establishing a signage along and outside the circuit to indicate the overview, the sites to visit. It includes the realization of development of rest and recreation areas around cultural and natural sites. Development and restoration of plants, species, and vegetation areas such as palmeries to promote biodiversity. The intervention involves rehabilitating the vegetation, especially in the canyon of Roufi, and developing agricultural areas at the bottom of the valley. Rehabilitation of at least one Gala, which is a collective attic, to serve as a model for future generations and to be an example given the important role this building has played in the installation of the Shawia tribes. The intervention consists in restoring the Gala, decorating the interior space and the exteriors. At the same time, documentation and old pictures of the place, signage will be put in place in order to offer a pleasant and an informative visit. Another point is the reconstruction of one or more old houses that could serve as guest houses. The house currently in ruins that has been recognized as a model of the vernacular Berber house would be rebuilt and transformed into a guest houses or souvenirs shops, allowing the reception and the lodging of the tourists, as well as putting them in a real and a typical context. And finally, the rehabilitation and management of production spaces found on some sites, such as water mills or oil mills. The intervention includes, after detailed architectural study, the rehabilitation of these production spaces, their interior and exteriors, fitting. The rehabilitation of these sites greatly increases the attractiveness of the region and the promotion of the cultural heritage. So, finally, to conclude, the various aspects present in the region show us how much the inhabitants remain attached to their tradition and way of life, despite the modernism that we see in the abandonment of some houses built of stone. The vernacular habitat remains a sustainable habitat, both for its local materials and its energy efficiency, as well as for its respect for the environment and integration with. This ancestral architecture should be preserved and improved in order to meet modern comfort needs as an architectural model in the region to maintain cultural identity. The abundance and the neglect of this heritage will lead to a total disappearance of it. The creation of an ecotourism will offer economic development to the region and will help to preserve and protect this Berber heritage. Thank you for your attention.